Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 6:30, and we start our meeting. And at this point, we invite you to stand for a moment of silence, and after that, we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I would like the clerk to note for the record that the Mayor Kotz is absent this evening, and I'm sitting in for her as acting mayor. The upcoming meetings, the regular council meetings, will be February 2nd at 6:30 p.m., Tuesday, February 16th at 6:30 p.m., an all-day work session on Tuesday, February 9th. Excuse me, I apologize. We're just a normal work session on Tuesday, February 9th at 6:30 p.m., and our all-day work session on Friday, January 29th at the boardroom at the Nicollet Inn. And of course, all other meetings will be held at the council chambers.
8:30 in the morning. The time on January 29th.
Yeah, it's 8:30 a.m., if I didn't say that. Thank you. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not coming before us at a future meeting. Does anyone wish to address the council regarding an item that is not to be discussed? Anyone that would like to address the council on an item not to be discussed? Anyone? Seeing or hearing no one, we'll move on. Are there any additions, emergency additions to the agenda?
None from staff, Acting Mayor.
Does council have any emergency additions they'd like to add? Seeing none, we'll move on. We next move to the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by motion. However, an item may be removed from this consent agenda on a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item to be removed from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Anyone in the audience? Does the staff wish to have an item removed?
None from staff, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Members of the council, do you wish to have an item removed?
Mr. Acting Mayor, I would like to remove item O.
Item O is removed from the consent agenda for discussion and vote. As to the rest of the consent agenda, may I have a motion for the balance?
Motion to approve.
A motion by Councilmember Keeley,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Wynn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. And discussion for your item,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Item O is to order the 2016 Multimodal Transportation Elements Project. The reason I'd like to pull this is that I'm delighted that this is being done, and this is, I'm going to read from the background. It's meant to analyze and improve the city's multimodal modes of transportation in areas other than the street improvement project areas. And the primary focus for 2016 is pedestrian crossings. And I know that there are a lot of citizens who are concerned about pedestrian crossings, and I just am pulling this to tell them that it is being addressed, and it is going to be very carefully studied, and I thank staff for doing this. And with that, I would move that we approve the order for the 2016 Multimodal Transportation Elements Project.
Second.
A motion's been made by Councilmember Sherry and seconded by Councilmember Keeley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. And now we move to the regular agenda. And I first now recess the City Council meeting to conduct our annual meeting of the Economic Development Authority. And Councilmember Keeley who's the president, will proceed.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I'll now call to order the Burnsville Economic Development Authority. Please let the record note that Commissioner Couts is absent tonight, as Acting Mayor Coughlin noted. We have a more full agenda than we normally have. First up, I want to ask if there is any additions to the agenda as presented. None seen. Move on to, we have election of officers by resolution. This is an annual process for us. A little bit of background for the viewing public and for those in the high school attending or looking for credits. The bylaws of the Burnsville Economic Development Authority state that officers of the authority shall be elected at the annual meeting. Those offices are President, Vice President, Secretary, Treasurer, Assistant Treasurer, and Executive Director. The offices of Secretary, Assistant Treasurer, and Executive Director need not be held by a Commissioner. Since the formation of the authority, these three offices have been held by the City Clerk, Chief Financial Officer, Finance Director, and City Manager, respectively. To avoid the possibility of one of the offices of Secretary, Assistant Treasurer, or Executive Director becoming vacant due to staff turnover, staff is recommending these three offices be elected by position rather than by specific staff member. The EDA attorney has consulted and agrees with the recommendation. The current officers for 2015 have been myself, Dan Keeley, as President, Mary Sherry as Vice President, our City Clerk as Secretary, Bill Coughlin, Commissioner Coughlin as Treasurer, our City Finance Director as the Assistant Treasurer, and our City Manager as the Executive Director. So I would entertain a motion for a slate for 2016.
Mr. President, I would offer the following slate for officers for 2016, and that would be Dan Keeley as President, Suzanne Nguyen as Vice President, the City Clerk as the Secretary, William Coughlin as the Treasurer, and City Finance Director as Assistant Treasurer, and the City Manager as Executive Director.
A motion has been made.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Coughlin, motion by Commissioner Sherry. First, before I call a vote, I want to thank the commissioners and Commissioner Sherry for your vote of confidence. This is a position that I think you have to stay in a little while to not only learn, but also work networks, make contacts with people. It's very much a less than in front of you type of work to be able to make contacts, work with brokers, shake some hands, make yourself available, track down some leads to try and help further our economic development. And to say nothing, this position pales to the work that our economic development coordinator, Skip Nienhaus, and the work that his department does to help further the economic development within the city. And then because we're a built-out city, there isn't a whole lot of land available to develop, so it's all about redevelopment and reuse of existing facilities. So thank you again for your vote of confidence. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, we have the consent agenda, which would be our approval of minutes from our December 8th special meeting. Any comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Wynn, second by Commissioner Sherry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. We do have one item on our regular agenda, and we are happy to have Mr. Skip Nienhaus presenting tonight. Take it away,
Thank you,
Skip.
Mr. President. The EDA bylaws stipulate that each year the EDA will compile an annual report Staff has compiled that report for you. It has been included in the background for review. Staff also, in your background, noted that in October, there was a council work session in which we discussed the MRQ. Staff presented the history of the MRQ, presented what strides we have made so far in the MRQ and what has not been implemented in the MRQ yet. We put that in your background as a way to memorialize that did take place, and then, as you all know, much more discussion of the vision of the MRQ will come during the comp plan. Staff would recommend that the EDA adopt the annual report for 2015, and I would stand for any questions.
Commissioners, any questions? Pretty straightforward report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We make it easy for you. Skip as much as we can. Entertain a motion to accept the Economic Development Authority Annual Report.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Sherry, second by Commissioner Wynn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Any miscellaneous items? I don't see any. Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
So I now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting.
Hang on. We need a second.
Second.
I thought you were going to make the second. Motion by Commissioner Sherry, second by
Second.
Commissioner Coughlin. Excuse me. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We now close the Burnsville Economic Development Authority meeting. Turn it back over to you, Acting Mayor, Councilmember Coughlin.
Thank you, Councilmember Keeley. I now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting. We move on to the item 6 on our agenda, the resolution reducing the speed limit on Judicial Road from Williams Drive to Burnsville Parkway. And speaking on this is Steve Albrecht, our Public Works Director. And I just note for the record that Mr. Robert Kump is here, and he'll be invited after to speak if he so chooses. And you may proceed.
Acting Mayor Coughlin, members of the council. The item before you tonight is the result of a petition by residents living on and adjacent to Judicial Road. The section of Judicial Road that we're looking at tonight, I'll back this graphic out for a second, is the area that runs from Williams to Burnsville Parkway. So starting at the north end at Williams, running down to Burnsville Parkway. The roadway is currently signed 40 miles per hour. There's an advisory 30-mile-an-hour curve at the south end. The roadway itself currently is one lane in each direction with some wide shoulders, and then pedestrian facilities all the way from the north to south end on one side, and then for a portion of the north end, they're on both sides. So this roadway was originally, the speed limit was set back in 1977 via the statutory process, and it was set at 40 miles an hour in that area. The petition asked that the city of Burnsville lower the speed limit, and as part of that petition, we looked at what are the options available to the city to lower the speed limit. The first item discussed was the traditional, if we were to request a speed study by MnDOT, to have that done on the project, rather than go through the delayed process of that to see whether it would be reduced or not. We had our consultant, SEH, who does several of these a year for us, do basically a mock speed study where they follow the same procedures as MnDOT, record the same data, and then we review it the same way MnDOT would, first of all, to determine whether or not it would make sense to go through that process if it would be statutory lowered. The results of that process yielded that most likely the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit would remain in place. The reasons for that are that the 85th percentile speeds, which is how the state sets speed limits, they look at 85% of the speeds are below a certain limit, and they set it at that 85th percentile, as they call it. In this case, our average combined 85th percentile at two locations was 42 and 44 miles an hour. That would tell you that 40 miles an hour in that area is most likely appropriate based on the current use of that roadway, using the state statutory process. Cities also have other processes available to us for various roadways depending on densities, lengths of roadways. One of the processes is to determine whether it's an urban or a rural district. Rural districts allow us to post the speed as low as 35 miles an hour. An urban district allows us to do 30 miles an hour, and there's even a further smaller residential district which allows 25 miles an hour, but it's for certain lengths of roadways only, which are not applicable. This roadway is about 1.2 miles long and doesn't fit that criteria, so we have to look at those other two classifications for determination. And what it does is it looks at the density, essentially, of access on the roadway, or density of homes on the roadway, or businesses. And this roadway has some areas, both at the north and south ends, that would meet that lower standard potentially of the urban standard, 30 miles an hour. There is a section of the roadway that's over a quarter mile long in the middle that does not meet that standard. And as we talked it through, if we were going to look at lowering a speed limit, we certainly would not recommend having a roadway be 30 miles an hour, then 35, then 40, then 35. We don't feel that that consistency makes a lot of sense. So what we determined is if the city was going to pursue lowering it using the statutory authority, it made sense to lower it to what the entire roadway would meet, which is the rural district standard of 35 miles per hour. And so that's why staff recommended the 35 mile per hour in the report for consideration. And so that's based on a density of at least a home every, or an access or per business every 300 feet. In the urban standard, it's 100 feet, and so in those long stretches where we have the cemetery and some other uses where there just isn't any houses immediately adjacent, that area wouldn't have qualified for that urban standard. And so we looked at those two methods and then looked at the pros and cons of those methods. And taking a step back and just looking at the roadway itself, as we noted, we received a petition. Historically, though, this roadway is not a roadway that's had high incidence on it, meaning we've had less than 2 accidents per year. There's no city fatality, either pedestrian or car accidents that have been recorded on the roadway. So from a police review of the safety factors on this roadway, that isn't necessarily the driving force. It is in a residential area. That area has changed dramatically since 1977 when it first was posted. So that would be the basis for the council to consider that change. And so in looking at that roadway, the Traffic Safety Committee, which is made up of our Police and Fire Divisions, Engineering Division, and Public Works Division, reviewed the information with our consultant from SEH, who works for numerous communities, and this is what they do for a living, and looked at what the pros and cons would be to lowering the speed limit to the 35 mile an hour speed limit. And while staff is not opposed to the 35 miles an hour, the reason that it was not recommended in this report is our concern is that we're going to give a false sense of enforcement to that neighborhood. Right now, we would not be, the roadway itself is designed and traffic travels safely at 40 miles an hour on that roadway. If we were to lower it to 35, we would take existing traffic resources and spread them thinner to this area too. We have other roadways. I'm sure Mr. Kump will tell you about roadways in town which we don't know all the history of how they got posted, but we don't enforce the speeds on those roadways. McAndrews is a great example of an area where you get 35 miles an hour where our police probably could sit out there all day long if they wanted to and ticket cars. We have other roadways in town that are similar to this roadway where they're posted low, where our police do not have time to do the enforcement, and we deal with a lot of the residents feel that we should do the enforcement. It's posted that way, we should do it. So that's the big concern is if we were to lower it to 35, there isn't necessarily a traffic resource that's going to go with this. It'll get some attention, but that attention will be from the existing resources that we have. So from an engineering and safety standpoint, there is not a driving cause to lower the speed limit this time, but the council's duty is to review also what you believe is the public value of this too. And is there a public value of reducing this? This roadway is not different than many roadways that are 30 miles an hour or 35 miles an hour in town. And it does have a residential component to it. So with that, staff has recommended that we leave it posted as it currently is, but we did prepare a resolution for the council should you determine that 35 miles an hour is appropriate for that roadway, because as I mentioned, council has to weigh factors outside of just engineering and safety. There is a public value that has to be weighed to that, and not all decisions are cut and dry related to engineering principles and engineering standards. And so with that, I would take any questions the council has. Again, you have a recommendation from the Traffic Safety Committee to leave it as is. The primary driving reason for that is this expectation of enforcement that will go with lowering the speed limit. It isn't a cost issue from a signage standpoint. Changing speed limit signs is a minimal cost to the city. It's really that we won't be adding enforcement throughout the city. We'll be taking it from someplace else. And so with that, I would stand for any questions the council has. And again, Mr. Kump is here, and I know he's got comments and some things he would like to say on the record too. So.
Any questions?
I'd like to hear from our citizen first.
And Mr. Kump, I initially told you you'd have, our general rule is 3 minutes. If you have more to say, I just have 2 comments. First of all, I remember when you approached us before on this matter, and you'd given us some information. But if you have more to say, I'm willing to give you up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I won't try to take too much time.
Okay.
But Steve covered the doggone lot of stuff here, but I don't have too much to add.
I'm just saying, I want to be
Yeah.
fair to you, so
Yep,
5 minutes.
Absolutely. I'm going to give the neighborhood perspective of it.
Okay.
I've lived in town for over 36 years.
Thank
I've seen
you.
the city's changed quite a bit, but I'm going to just give you a quick brief. I took a bunch of pictures here of what going through the city here. This is from the south, from Judicial going road. You can see there's a sharp curve, a hill. This is kind of an interesting picture here because you kind of come around. This is Vincent Circle over this way. You see the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. You can see a car coming around a curve right here. But you look right over here, there's a playground in somebody's backyard. Can't hardly be 20 feet from the road, 40 miles an hour. 40. Here you go down here by the cemetery, and it warns you have a blind intersection ahead. The blind intersection just happens to be Skyview Drive. That's where they did one of the surveys. Not only is there a blind intersection, but you're going up a hill and around a curve, so I think that the survey is completely flawed because of that. You come down the end, you can see there's a stop sign, a warning that there's a stop sign. Going back to the north, you can see it's a curve. Get all the way down to the end there by the parkway, and you can see there's a warning for the 30 miles an hour and another warning that there's a stop sign coming up. I wonder if there's hardly any other signs like that in the city, that the speed is so fast that they have to put a warning telling you there's a stop sign approaching. When I first brought this up to the city, and I know neighbors have too, the first thing they do is they try to scare you, and they say, oh, they're probably going to raise the speed limit. They always do that, and I think it gets half the people that get their mouths shut and they go away afraid it's going to raise up. So what would they do? Put another sign like this farther back here so they'd have a warning sign for the warning sign? I mean, I had those 75 signatures. There were only 4 people that wouldn't sign it, and those were people that probably had not lived there very long. But in 1977, when that road got changed from 30 to 40, I think it was blacktop the year before, there were only 12 homes on that road. Only 8 of them had driveways on the Judicial Road. I remember in 1983 going there to take pictures of Billy Goat Bridge. What used to be called the Burnsville Crosstown was a gravel road on the other side of the Billy Goat Bridge. I think all that road was to get people from downtown Savage over to Valley Ridge Shopping Center to go shopping at Sullivan's or maybe to Burnsville Center because it had just opened. But there's no way 40 miles an hour is the right speed. Even in the state thing here, that's a rural, right here, 35 miles an hour. If that road was built today, it would be 35 miles an hour, no ifs, ands, or buts. And he talks about no police resources. You know what? You go to South Cross. You have a 4-lane divided road, turning lanes, traffic lights, 4 miles long, only 4 driveways on the road, 35 miles an hour. I'm kind of almost insulted when I drive down that road and I see these little orange reflectors on the 35-mile-an-hour sign to make sure you're driving 35 through their neighborhood, but yet they want to go through my neighborhood at 40. What about you putting your thing there, 134th Street? I don't like going through there at 30. Why don't we raise that to 40? I'm sure the neighbors ain't gonna like that. I mean, what's fair is fair. That's just the tip of the iceberg on some of these roads. Because you could do the same thing with Portland, Lac Lavon, Kennelly, River Hills Drive, Burnsville Parkway, east of County Road 11. You get into where the houses are. Jiminy Crickets, the speed limit drops from 40 to 30, right where you get to the houses. Traveler's Trail, Judicial Road, south of 42. It's the exact same road, Speed limit's 30. 30. Why don't we survey to raise up the speed on all these other roads? He talks about enforcing it. Well, if we lowered it to 35 and people were speeding, they would only be going the speed they're going right now. You know, if we lower it to 35 and put up some orange reflectors, 85% of the people are probably going to drive the speed limit. It's going to take a while to get people used to driving slower on the road. But you know what? I don't think these 85 or 75 people that drive the petition, a lot of them have lived at that location on Judicial Road for a very long time. And I think it's only fair to them. I mean, people have complained about this for many, many years. And I figure it's just time to do something about it. But I guess that's about all I got. I got a lot more, but I don't want to rattle on too long either, so.
Could you stand for questions?
Sure.
Council, anybody have any questions?
I don't, I just a comment, you know, you've done a lot of homework and brought a lot to the table. 75 signatures, the photos, the history, and, you know, you pair that up with the work that the engineering and law enforcement and fire has done, and we have a pretty comprehensive, you know, study and research done to help us make a decision. It certainly helped me because these are the situations that we don't necessarily hear about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so having citizens like yourself willing to take the time to do that type of research to help educate us so we can make a good decision is very beneficial to us. So thank you for that.
Sure, you bet. You know what, I really wish I could have sat in on no safety, because I talked to Walter and I was almost begging him to let me sit in on some of those meetings, because, man, I could have chatted away, and then coming here, I was hoping they would recommend just to lower it, and then it would have been that much easier, but.
And Mr. Kump, just so I'm clear, your proposal is that council should go with 35 miles an hour as against leaving it at 40, is that correct?
That's correct. I would love to see 30.
But
I'll go with the 35. I'll be happy with the 35. Believe you me, this spring, I want to go back to everybody that signed that petition, and I want to give them good news, I hope.
But as I understand your proposal this evening, that's what you're
Right.
asking council
Yeah.
to do, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Mary is trying to get your attention.
I thought I'd just push that to see
Councilmember
if you're paying
Sherry.
attention. First of all, Mr. Kump, is that correct?
Right.
Kump. I have lived here just a little longer than you have, and I do remember going over to the Billy Goat Bridge, and when there was very little development over there. And after you came up here before, again, I went back over there. I live near 134th. And,
Oh, do you?
Yes, I do.
Oh, I came up and got your signature if I would have known that.
But anyway, I went back over there. On rare occasions, have been there because I normally don't have reason to go there. So anyway, I went there looking at it, trying to see it from your eyes. And I agree with you. And I also want to correct something you said, and that is, I don't think that the engineering department says they could raise it to scare you, because that's not the case. They know what they're talking about when you take a road like this, and you do risk having, is it the state that would come in and say, no, that speed's really too low. I'm a proponent of lower speeds all over, and except on the interstates. And I have had long discussions with Mr. Albeck about that very point, and he's absolutely right. There is a risk in that. Having said all that, that has not applied here. So according to the studies that the traffic department did, it could be lowered without, there's not that risk of having it raised or having it stay the same. So, council, I'm in favor of lowering it. I know that staff has a lot of concerns about it, and I respect those. However, I do believe this is a case where the citizens have asked for something, and I think that there's no law that says we shouldn't give it to them.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Well, I just want to say, too, I also agree with
Councilmember Sherry. And I want to thank Mr. Albrecht for the study and for all of the work that went into it. It was very well done, and it's nice to have the pros and the cons. But I agree that, given that we have 75 signatures that say we really feel this is important. And I think, too, when we see those signs, and especially, I'm sure you flag them when they're new like that, people do take a look at that, and I think they do slow down. So I agree. I think that it would be reasonable in this particular case.
Councilmember Keeley?
I didn't hit the button because you,
Shows up wrong anyway.
there were some points made about comparing this road to other roads of similar nature. In one case, I think it was South Cross. In your opinion, Mr. Albrecht, is this road, forget all the other facts, the history or whatever, is this road at 40 appear to be a little out of sync with other roads with residential access that are set at 30 and 35? I mean, if we were to draw the city the way it is today, would this road get posted at 40 based on all the criteria that set those other roads at 30 and 35?
If this road was built today because of the state statute, it's a state aid roadway. State aid roadways are required to go through the state aid process, so it would be posted at 40. However, the statute allows cities, because of residential characteristics of roadways, to make a resolution to lower it. I don't have the history. All the roadways he mentioned were posted before I came to the city. I don't know the process, and I wouldn't speak to how those got to be those. I would suggest that some of them probably were arbitrarily done that way. It wouldn't surprise me. Every city, we've been around for 50 years, so there are things that have been done over 50 years with roadways. Some of the roadways are county roadways too, the way those were posted.
Sure.
Oftentimes, roadways have a speed limit from the early days they were there, and then when they're improved, they're never studied or anything's done to change them. Burnsville Parkway, some of those speed limits may have been when it was a one-lane road, and they never changed the limits. So, but in this case, as noted, staff, there isn't a safety factor or an issue with the council lowering it. The issue is consistency, and we will be stretched thin on resources. It doesn't mean we're not going to enforce a speed limit on this roadway. We will, and we will certainly do the things like we did. South Cross is a little different. We had some accident issues on South Cross, which was part of, I believe, the history of where it got to that point and why the signs are marked the way they are to get people's attention. But that doesn't mean this roadway is less critical. This roadway conveys 2,000 to 2,500 cars a day from Williams to Judicial, and a lot of those cars aren't the residents that live on the roadway too. So we certainly understand the concern that the residents have on that neighborhood, and we respect that concern. We want to give the council all sides of it, but remembering that you have to weigh that public factor to this whole equation. And so Mr. Kump has made a very compelling case as to why the neighborhood feels it should be posted at 35.
Sure, and I would agree with comments by my fellow council members. We don't have that many situations where 75 citizens sign a petition and come before us, do the homework that you did, staff did the homework they did. It makes this decision a lot easier because it's a lot clearer when you have all the facts in front of you, what you think is the best interest of the city. And I would concur, I would recommend that we go to 35.
And Mr. Albrecht, you mentioned that you had a resolution that would be prepared, ready to go if the council so desired, and I think that by comments of the council, that is the council's desire.
Based on the comments of the council, we recommend that you approve a resolution lowering the speed limit on Judicial Road between Burnsville Parkway and Williams Drive to 35 miles per hour. And you have that resolution in your packet, I believe. So.
I make that motion.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Sherry, seconded by Councilmember Wynn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against, same sign. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. I am going to be happy to go back to my neighbors, each and every one of them.
But
with
watch
good
your
news.
speed.
You know what? I ain't kidding you. I do drive 35, and it drives me crazy when I see people in my rearview mirror and they come right up on me. It drives me crazy. But I will watch the speed. Thank you very much.
Acting Mayor Coughlin.
Councilmember Keeler.
I wanted to make one comment I forgot to make when I was talking earlier about the enforcement. That is a concern.
Yeah.
We aren't adding resources to be able to monitor this. I think it's going to get the same coverage that the rest of the city gets based on the resources that we have. And so I hope that the neighborhood who's watching tonight isn't expecting Gizmo to be posted there and patrol cars to be there and major cost effort to call attention to this change. It seems to me that they will be good advocates of making sure that people slow down there. And I know the new signs will obviously be obvious. And I'm wondering, though, too, if some of those signs should bear the same characteristics that was referenced with South Cross as far as having a little bit of a border on them, a reflector border to make them a little bit more obvious. Is there something we can do to dress up or trim them to make the signs a little more obvious?
What actually is typically done is we will have some signs posted that will say traffic control change ahead or traffic change ahead. You see those. But then the signs actually will get a new placard and be flagged. So it'll even be more noticeable. They'll have an orange flags on coming off of them to grab people's attention.
Excellent.
And then we'll monitor and we'll make those other decisions as needed. We know this road, the comfort speed is 40, so we'll have to monitor and see, if it goes down. The one end of the road, the two ends of the road, 40 feels fast, but I would tell you the middle of the road, our traffic study didn't look at the long stretch in the middle. I'd be surprised if that stretch isn't even higher than 40 with the average speeds in that location. So the Traffic Safety Committee will monitor that and make some sign adjustments as needed, but the council doesn't need to weigh in on that. We'll try to make sure that it's safe and well marked.
Thank you. And I said, not necessarily we're going to send Gizmo out there, but can we deploy our robot radar station, I don't know what it's called, out there for a while? Because when we're making a change like this, we're calling attention to it with the flags, sometimes having that out there for a period of weeks. And everyone cycles through there and sees, okay, slow down, here's a new, and I think that's a better way to do it than put a patrol officer out there pulling people over, right off the bat. I'd like to see something like that out there if we have the availability of it.
Yeah, we'll look at when we'll make the sign changes as soon as possible. Gizmo will have to wait till snow season is done, or Gizmo will get plowed under most likely. So, but we will monitor that and we will be paying attention to see if it. We also have the pole mounted device, which we can use also that PD has, and that might be a better device that's not in danger of being plowed under. We don't want to deploy that when it's 20 below zero because of the electronics, but as we get towards spring, we'll be able to start doing that stuff, and that'll allow us to monitor and see if the speed signs are having any change in behavior against what our kind of litmus test was from this fall.
Right.
So
Thank you.
we can monitor that and work with the residents, and I'm sure, and we have our eyes on the ground out there too, who will let us know
Speed patrol.
what things are working and what things aren't working. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve.
Council, we have no other matters before us, and I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to approve. Move to adjourn, sorry.
Motion is made to adjourn by Councilmember Keeley,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, same sign, and the motion carries. Good night, and thank you.
I must have